All right. Good morning. How's everyone doing? Good to see you all. Hope you had a good weekend. But we're really glad that you could join us. Seeing lots of people here. Karibuni sana. So guys streaming in, which is good. Hope everyone is well this beautiful morning. The sun is out. Hopefully it's also going to be a beautiful week and a beautiful day on the charts. But we're really glad that you could join us. So for the sake of guys who are joining us here for the first time, John Bogo is my name. I'm a trader with Afriforex. Afriforex, like we always say, the trading unit. So it's not a one-man show. We also do have Mitch here. He is working in the back office. So in case you do have any questions, as always, feel free to ask them both on the Q&A section and also on the chat box. Mitch will be getting back to you, but I will also be looking at the questions more specifically in the Q&A section. But of course, towards the tail end of the session. But like we always say, don't really wait until the very end. You can still ask your questions even as the webinar does end up progressing on. Of course, that goes out to the guys who are here on Zoom. For the guys who are joining us on the social media platforms, if you want to interact with us, then make sure you do come into the Zoom meeting. There should be a link in the various video descriptions that should guide you here. So we're going to jump straight into it, of course, by looking at what we did have on Friday. Then look at what the charts are going to be looking like today. So you can see this is what the watch list was looking like on Friday. Moving into today, there's only two changes. The Australian dollar and the New Zealand dollar have switched sides to the sell side. So that means the currency pair that we're going to be having for review are the Great British Pound. I mean, the New Zealand dollar pairs and the Australian dollar pairs. So we'll start off with this one. This is the Great British Pound against the New Zealand dollar. So for this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could have gotten some selling opportunities. You can see the three regions right there that had been pointed out. And in the morning, when we're looking at the charts, price was somewhere here. So you can see that at around 9, 10, price was down within this region right here. We wanted to see whether we could get the market coming back in within here and possibly get some sellers reacting, but there was nothing. But remember that I did point out that price was down within some sort of a buyer's region. Wasn't a really good time to look for the sales, and you clearly can't see why now. I mean, hindsight is always 2020. So you can clearly see the reasons why now. Unfortunately, there were no sellers within this region right here, but you can see that the market did come back in, bounced off this region aggressively, no sellers within there, and of course, once price broke this region to the upside, and of course that means that's today, the markets have really started off with a lot of energy, especially you will definitely see that with a lot of the yens, the New Zealand dollar and the Australian dollar pairs. But of course, for this one, for today, unfortunately, not really a currency pair that we will be watching out for. So the next one is the Great British Pound against the Australian dollar, more or less like the sister currency pair to the Great British Pound against the New Zealand dollar. So you can see for this one, we're trying to also see whether we could have gotten some sales on Friday, but you can't see that the market did exactly similar to what we saw on the other one. So in the morning, price was down within here. Wasn't a good time to really look for those selling opportunities. We did need to see a breach to the downside, or maybe if the market came back in within here and you did see some, a sign of the sellers coming in, then maybe we would have looked for the sales. But clearly, you can see that the sellers were nowhere to be seen. And of course, moving into today, you can see how the Australian dollar is really getting hammered. So there's a lot of weakness coming in on the New Zealand dollar pairs and also on the Australian dollar pairs. So you'll definitely see that even as we continue moving along. So the next one is the New Zealand dollar against the Canadian dollar. So for this one, on Friday, trying to see whether we could have gotten some buys. I can clearly see the three regions right here that I had pointed out. And in the morning, we could go back to a time like this on Friday. Price was somewhere within here. I did point out that it wasn't a good idea to look for your buys when price was up there. We did need to either see price come back in within here or somewhere within here for us to look for the buys, or maybe if the market broke to the upside. And you can see that the market broke to the upside of this region, came back in, possibly something that needed to be read on a smaller time frame. And you can see that the buyers did really attempt to push this market to the upside. But unfortunately, they couldn't go higher than that. But you can see that the market was fooling around within this region before today morning. I don't know what the big boys are up to, but you can definitely see that moving into today, that one has really come down to the downside quite aggressively. So similar situation with this one, more or less the same as the New Zealand dollar against the Canadian dollar. So for this one, you can clearly see the three areas that I had pointed out. The idea was to look for buys. The buys did work. And you can see that in the morning price was somewhere within this region right here. It talks about maybe you could find maybe the market spiking and probing within this region. It did do that a number of times. And you can see that the market really held within there. If you did get buys here, you definitely needed to manage, within that region there. You can see the number of times that the buyers attempted to get above that region, but they just couldn't. And the sellers did push the market down, possibly something to do with the non-farm payroll. Some fight was going on here. And you can see that once the market came back in within here, the buyers really struggled, to push the market to the upside. And you can see moving into today, all hell has broken loose, for the sellers, for the buyers rather. They've seen the sellers really come in with a lot of vengeance. So unfortunately, not really a currency pair that we're going to be watching out for today. So those are pretty much all the currency pairs that we do have for review. So right now we're going to jump in on the currency pairs that we do have for today. So for the guys who are just checking in, karibuni sana. This is going to be our watch list for today. So feel free to take note of that. So we're going to start off with the Great British Pound pairs, mix and match them up with everything on the sell side, the currency pairs, rather move on to the Canadian dollar pairs, the Australian dollar pairs, the New Zealand dollar pairs, and then last but not least, we'll finish off with the indices and the commodities. So the first one off, the Great British Pound against the Japanese yen. So for this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could have gotten some selling opportunities. You clearly can't see the three areas that I had pointed out. They're looking quite small within here, of course, based on how the market has really calmed down. But on Friday, they were not looking that small. But just to go back to that time, so you can't see at a time like this on Friday, price was down within this region. I did point out that we did need to see the market break and hold beneath this region to the downside, maybe even some attempts to break to the upside, which could have been unsuccessful, would have been good. And you can't see that the market really held within here. I think once the non-farm payroll came out, you can't see that that was at exactly 3:30. That's when the market came to the downside. But like we always point out, there's no need to chase. You can imagine guys who are hitting sales down here with their stops here. All those guys were definitely wiped out. And you can see that the market literally came back in within here. And after that, you can see that the market did move to the downside. And moving into today, you can see how far the market has gone. So for this one, don't really know what could be up with the big boys or what they could be up to. But the yen pairs have really, really moved a lot. And you can see that right now the market has come back in within some sort of a buyer's region within here. So the best game plan would be don't really chase sales now. I know lots of people are hitting sales right now, especially considering the fact that they are very late on the sales and they're just trying to be chasing. At this point in time, they couldn't get the sales earlier. But right now, since it's so obvious, I would advise you possibly don't end up jumping in. On those trades, you could easily end up jumping into issues. So possibly just end up being a bit patient. You could find the market, either it could bounce off here, and you could find that the market could pull back into the upside. I mean, we've just seen that this region right here is a support region. And if that does end up happening, then what you could find is that maybe the market could come back in within this region right here. It's just broken this area to the downside. So this is the most recent SNR or resistance to the upside. And remember, when we're selling, we always want to be selling where there are sellers or where there's a resistance area. So you could find that maybe price could come back in within there. If not, and of course, considering the fact that we're down within some sort of a buyer's region, you could find that maybe the buyers could really come in, stop out all the people who are selling quite late, and you could find the market coming back in within here. So just watch out for those three areas right there. But remember that in case the market breaks above this region to the upside, then unfortunately for us on that one, then we'll not be looking for any selling opportunities. So the next one, this is the Great British Pound against the Swiss franc. So you can't see for this one, we're also watching out for sales. I mean, if you got sales on the Great British Pound pairs and you held on over the weekend for some reason, then I think you must have woken up to some good profits. And I think you must be very happy right now. So you can see the three regions right there that I had pointed out. And in the morning, at a time like this, when we're looking at the charts, price was down within here. I did point out that we did need to see the market break and hold beneath this region to the downside. That did happen. You can see more or less almost a similar situation as the Great British Pound against the Japanese yen. So the market broke to the downside, came back in within here for some pullback. You can see that from around 4:30, that's when the market really started the journey to the downside, moving into today, and it's really gone. I mean, in the morning when we're looking at the charts with the team, price was somewhere within this region coming down. It's interesting to see that the market has already gone way past that region to the downside. So let's just try and see where we are in the grand scale of things. So you can see that the market has come back in within this area right here. more or less like a similar situation with the Great British Pound against the Japanese yen. I wouldn't really end up advising you to, look for those selling opportunities right now. I mean, if you hadn't gotten the sales earlier, then you're much better off possibly waiting for a pullback because the big boys could possibly be liquidating their orders right now. And I mean, if you end up jumping in right now, then it means that they're handing over, their liabilities to you to carry forth. And I don't really think you might be able to do that. So don't think that's a responsibility that you want to be taking. So just watch out for these three areas right here. So let's see what happens. I mean, we've just looked at the bigger time frame. We're within some sort of a support region here. So it's unless the market breaks beneath this region to the downside and we get a proper pullback and a hold, then we could possibly end up looking for the selling opportunities, but you'll have to watch out for this region at the bottom. The best bet would be if the market could ideally possibly come back in within that region there, give us, just a slightly deeper pullback, then that would be good. But, it's also dependent on if the Great British Pound can possibly end up getting, some strength, because the Swiss franc pairs are extremely strong and the yen pairs are also extremely strong. So you can see on both these currency pairs or the Great British Pound pairs that we've looked at, the Great British Pound is really getting hammered. So let's wait and see what happens. Hopefully the market pulls back in within these two areas. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's see what happens. And remember the red SNR at the top, in case the market breaks that, then unfortunately, there will be no trade for us. So the next one is the Great British Pound against the US dollar. So for this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could have gotten sales. You can see the three regions right here that I had pointed out. And in the morning, when we're looking at the charts, price was somewhere within this area right here. Did point out that we did possibly want to see the market tap in, maybe somewhere within there for us to look for the sales. But you can see that during the London market open, or just before that, there was a price somewhere within here, which was more or less maybe good enough for the sellers to push down. But you can see that the buyers within this region really came in quite aggressively, took out the sellers within that area. Couldn't see anything to do with sales or sellers within that area. You can see that I think once a non-farm payroll came in, you can see that the market really spiked to the upside, came and challenged those sellers within that region there. And it seems like they were a bit stunned within there because you can see that the market was more or less, holding within this region up until right now. That's when the market has really started to come to the downside. So these are the three areas we had earlier, so we could still keep them because of course when we're looking at the charts in the morning, price was somewhere within here, but since the sellers have come down, it's okay. You don't really need to chase. Watch out for this area right here. So the levels on this one will be, watch out for this region right here. So unless we get a breach of that region to the downside, maybe at that point in time we could look for some selling opportunities. Just a minor adjustment on this one. Watch out for that area right there because you could find the market pulling back in within here. Seems like there's an SNR within this region right here. And of course, I think you can also watch out for this region right here. Definitely an area where you could possibly end up finding the market maybe coming back all the way up until. So this red SNR, I think what we can end up doing with this one is we could still leave it here, because ideally you can see that even the US high and the market that the highest part that the market did actually end up tapping was here, during Friday. So it came down all the way from here till the top there. So for this one, a bit technical, could possibly end up having 4 levels on it. But I think generally if these sellers are taken out and the market really comes back in all the way till the top, then at least at that point in time, you could possibly end up overlooking that particular currency pair. So the next one is the euro against the Great British Pound. So this one also a currency pair we had on Friday. We're trying to see whether we could get some buys. You can see the 3 areas right there that I had pointed out. In the morning when we're looking at the charts, price was somewhere within here. And you can see that the market broke to the upside. Technically did hold above. Unfortunately, just couldn't come back in within there. But you can see that the market did continue moving to the upside. So it seems that the weakness on the Great British Pound was really showing on this one, just like we've seen on most of the others. So right now, seems like the Frankfurt big boys have really woken up, to really start buying the euro or selling the Great British Pound rather. And you can see that the market is back in within this region right here. So it seems like there's some sort of an SNR within that area. So just going back to the 15-minute time frame, don't really look for buys right now. I mean, unless you had gotten the buys earlier and your money managing your trades, then you're much better off. So what we can do is we can bring the red SNR maybe somewhere within this region here. So for this one, these are going to be the three areas. So we have this region at the top. Let's see if we can break that region to the upside. If that doesn't end up happening, hopefully we can keep our fingers crossed and see if we can get a pullback coming in within that region there. If it does, then that would be good. At least, you know, the opposite party coming in for us to do business with them. That's definitely what we want to see. So let's see if we can get the market coming back in within there, maybe somewhere till within this region right here. So remember the red scenario, if the market breaks beneath that, then unfortunately there will be no trade for us. So that's pretty much it for the Great British Pound pairs. So right now we're going to move on to the Canadian dollar pairs, and we're going to mix the card with everything on the buy side. So we'll start off with the Canadian dollar against Japanese yen. For this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could have gotten some sells. You can see the three areas that I had pointed out. And in the morning, when we're looking at the charts, price was somewhere within here. So we did want to see the market break and hold beneath this region to the downside. You can see that the market did that. It was a very sloppy breach to the downside, but you can see that the market was back in within this area at around 330 during the non-farm period. You can see that's when the journey to the downside really did end up beginning. So for this one, for today, what we can end up doing, let's just go up one time frame, just to gain context of what could be happening within this region here, because most of these Canadian dollar pairs, you'll find that most of them are hitting extremes, especially I think on the Canadian dollar against the Swiss franc, which we'll end up looking at in a bit. So for this one, what we could end up doing, finding that mid-level is a bit tricky, but I think based on how the market has moved, let's just adjust them slightly, possibly put them like this. So at least they are more relevant, you know, for today, because if they end up also being too wide, could find that they might not really be very relevant for today. So do watch out for these three areas right here. Seems like the market is bouncing off this region here. Let's see if it does come back in somewhere within this region, somewhere within these weeks. You could find that the sellers definitely are sitting somewhere within there. Could possibly find some good selling opportunities, you know, happening off that region there. So watch out for that. Also watch out for this region at the top, somewhere within this area right here. You can see that the sellers who are pushing the market down are sitting somewhere within that region. So just make sure that you watch out for that. In case they're taken out, then, you know, at that point in time, it means that the selling opportunities will definitely be out. So moving on into the next one, this is the Canadian dollar against the Swiss franc. For this one on Friday, also watching out for sells. Can't see the 3 years that I had pointed out. In the morning, price was somewhere here. I did point out that we did need to see a breach of this area to the downside. The breach did happen. You know, it looks small because the market has really moved quite far, but at least when you end up magnifying this region right here, you can see exactly what happened. So in the morning, when I'm looking at the charts, price was here. I did point out that we did need to see the market break and hold beneath this region, and maybe on the pullback, look for the sells. Fortunately, the pullback just came shy of that area, but it did tap this region before. You can see that the market did really come to the downside quite aggressively. So for this one, for today, it seems that the market has already come in within that region there. So maybe I think we could adjust our areas, possibly have something like that. This one is pretty interesting. I think this one, I think one of these Canadian dollar pairs we're looking at with the team, and we found that I think it's the lowest it's ever been, like ever. So I think it could be this one, because I think price has never been there. Yeah, you can't see, there's no data past this region right here. So this is back in 2004. So you can see the dinosaur age after that. So right now we are beneath that dinosaur right there. So this one is a bit tricky, especially considering the fact that we're making levels as we're moving along. You know, we're more or less trading in the unknown. You know, we've never been here before. We don't have much in terms of reference points. You know, like past this region, if the market breaks to the downside, we don't know where we're heading. You know, we'll just have to keep up with the story of what's going on. So it can be a bit tricky, but of course, interesting times to trade. Because I mean, even when price was somewhere within here, if you took the trade, you didn't know how far the market was going to go. But the good thing about it is, I mean, since it's bottomless right now, what you end up doing is, for as long as you can manage your trades and just keep up with your stop loss, as the market continues to move lower and lower, you don't know how far the market could easily end up going. So right now, based on the story of what's happening, these are the 3 areas that we do have. So you can't see that the sellers did push off there. Maybe if the market does come back in within that region, then maybe we could get some selling opportunities within that area. Of course, you will need to manage here. This is the next reference point that we do have visually. So, I mean, if you don't end up managing your trade within there, then ideally you're throwing a lot of caution, to the wind. So you just need to make sure that you really watch out for that, but also watch out for that region at the top. In case the market breaks above that to the upside, then unfortunately at that point in time, you'll have to be on standby. So the next one is the US dollar against the Canadian dollar. So for this one, we're trying to see whether we could have gotten some buys. You can't see that in the morning on Friday, price was somewhere within here. We did want to see the market come back in within this region. It did, although you possibly needed to read this on a smaller time frame. And after that, you consider the market really went to the upside. Once a non-farm payroll came out, and at around 3 during the US market opened, the market was within some sort of a seller's region. So it's not surprising to see that the market really came down quite aggressively, but you can see that the buyers within this region did contain them. And this region was more derived, especially from the story on the bigger time frame. Consider the market broke to the upside. We're expecting maybe some sort of a pullback, based on the bigger time frame for the market to come back in within here, which it did. And you can see that the buyers have really pushed to the upside quite aggressively. So right now, you can see that the market has moved to the upside. I don't know what could be happening. It's very unusual, to see that the markets are moving, especially on a Monday morning. Most of the time, you find that the markets normally tend to start moving from around, the US session. But when you find that the Asian big boys are already up and running on a Monday morning, then you tend to wonder what could be going on. But of course, considering the fact that the non-farm payroll was on Friday, so maybe they're just waking up to decisions, that they've already made over the weekend and stuff. So maybe to some extent that could be it. So for this one, watch out for these 3 areas right here. More or less the same 3 areas. But I could end up adding a region somewhere within here, considering the fact that the market has gone to the upside. Right now, it's pulling back in within here. You could find some really good buys happening off here. But you'll have to manage your trade somewhere within this area right here, because you can't see that the buyers went up aggressively. The sellers are coming down also quite aggressively. So, I mean, on the next time when you're coming back in within there, you just need to be fearful of those sellers in case they do end up reacting again. So watch out for those 3 areas, and of course a 4th area right there. Right now, we're not too sure whether this could be a probe. That's the reason why I haven't put a yellow SNR there, because you could find that the market could come back in. If it does end up coming back into the downside and this ends up being a massive probe, then I guess these are the 3 areas that we'll have to end up playing with. But of course, if it does bounce off here, then the next SNR you could watch out for is at the top, somewhere within there. So the last Canadian dollar pair is the euro against the Canadian dollar. So for this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could have gotten some buying opportunities. Can't see the 3 areas right there that I had pointed out. And in the morning when I'm looking at the charts, price was somewhere here. I did expect maybe to see price possibly come back in within this region here, because at that point in time, it looked like these sellers were quite adamant, but unfortunately just came shy of this area. But it seems that there was an SNR somewhere within here. And it seems that's where the journey of the buyers on Friday did end up beginning. And you can see that they really pushed to the upside quite aggressively, moving even into today. But of course, almost something similar with what we've seen on the US dollar against the Canadian dollar. So for this one, these are the 3 areas we will be watching out for. So right now, the market is coming back in within this region. Let's see if we can get a slowdown of the sellers. The way they're coming down, it's a bit suspect. I mean, something similar to what we've seen on the US dollar against the Canadian dollar. So just make sure that you watch out for the correlation on both of them. If you do end up seeing something on one, maybe also have a look at the other. But let's see if we can at least get a slowdown. This is a bit aggressive for our liking in terms of the buys. So you could easily find that maybe the buys might not happen here. Maybe they might end up happening maybe somewhere down within here. So just make sure that you watch out for that. But also remember, if price breaks the red SNR to the downside, then unfortunately at that point in time, there will be no trade for us on the euro against the Canadian dollar. So that's pretty much it for the card pairs. So right now we're going to move on to the AUD pairs, mix and match them up. So for this one, this is the Australian dollar against the Japanese yen. So for this one, we're going to be watching out for sells. And you can see that this one has broken to the downside. So we don't even know where this one is heading. I mean, in the morning, it was already a bit of a trick trying to find those levels. And right now you can see that the market has technically come down all the way to within this region right here. So it seems that the sellers or the buyers on the yen are really pushing this thing lower and lower. So let's just go back to this one. So what we'll do is we'll substitute this one with the red, put it somewhere within here. Seems like the sellers who are pushing us somewhere within that region there. So I guess these are going to be our three areas for today. So right now we're back within a support region. You can see a massive wick right there. Could be a sign of some sort of a rejection that's happening right now. And of course, remembering the fact that even if the market has been coming down, you don't really want to be chasing sales, especially when the market is down here. Let's see if we can get the market coming back in within this region here. If it does, then at least we could look for the sells. Maybe a sell to come down. If you break that area to the downside, you'll definitely have to watch out for the bottom of this week. Because one thing you need to ask yourself is, if the sellers came down this much and the market did actually end up being pushed back to the upside of this area here, then that should tell you that there's definitely someone who's sitting there who could also possibly give you issues, and you need to watch out for that guy on your way down. I mean, if you end up breaking this region to the downside, then well and good. That's where money management comes into play, like we always talk about. But do watch out for this region at the top. Could easily find that if the market comes back in within there and that seller is taken out, then you could find that maybe the market could possibly start to go to the upside, maybe for a deeper pullback. So the next one is the Australian dollar against the Swiss franc. So for this one, also a new entrant on our watch list. We're going to be trying to see whether we can get some selling opportunities. You can see that today the charts are making us reevaluate our levels over and over again. Can't quite tell what the big boys are up to, because it's very unusual to find the markets moving on a Monday morning. But that's the interesting thing about FX. It's unpredictable. So you can't see this one based on the daily. We had to go all the way to the daily because you couldn't find these levels on the smaller time frames. And you can see that based on the daily, the last time price was back in within this area was back in March 2020. So consider this one is challenging a low somewhere within this region right here. If we go back to the 15, just trying to make sense of what's going on here, you could find that maybe the market could come back in within somewhere in the middle right here, although can't quite tell what that level could be, maybe unless you go back to the daily again just to try and get some sort of a reference point. It's a bit difficult because you can see that here somewhere in between there's really nothing really happening within there. So what we're going to do is possibly try and make it some sort equidistant. So the low is somewhere within here. We'll leave this one somewhere in the middle, somewhere within there, maybe just giving a midpoint between those two areas there. Let's see if we can possibly end up getting the market bouncing off that region. There's definitely this region right here that you can visually see. You can see the sellers did actually push to the downside within that area there. So let's see what happens, within those areas right there. So hopefully you can end up taking note of those three areas right there. To some extent on the 3-minute, it looks like, yeah, it could be here. You can see that the market came down, technically bounced off here. When it broke to the downside, maybe it could just be coming back in within there. So to some extent, I think we could be right on that one. So let's wait and see what happens. I mean, there's only one way to find out. After the market does end up making a move, that's how we'll end up finding out. So the next one, this is the Australian dollar against the US dollar. Similar situation with the rest and most of the currency pairs we've seen. You can see that in the morning when we're doing the analysis, the market was here. This was unexpected. Although we were expecting weakness to come in on the AUDs, but the weakness has really come in way more than we expected. But can see that the market is back in within here. Seems like the markets are challenging daily levels. So let's see if we can end up also doing some adjustments on this one as well. So we have the low right there. You can see that the market did actually end up starting the move to the downside, maybe somewhere within this particular region right here. Market has spiked there. Let's see. I'm not too sure about this region in the middle because finding a reference point for it, this one is not as difficult as the other one. You can see that the market has bounced off here a number of times. So this one is not too much guesswork like on the other one. So I guess we could possibly end up trying to see what happens within these three areas right here. So the fact that the market is back in within this area here, let's see if we can possibly end up getting some sort of a push of the buyers. Remember, considering the fact that there's a wick here, you also need to be asking yourself some questions. Why is there a massive wick within here? Does that mean that maybe the buyers are possibly starting to get ready to come in? Is it because we've hit, a major level, maybe on the daily? You could find that the daily buyers are the ones who are starting to possibly end up trying to give some sort of a pushback. But ideally, of course, there's always one thing you need to wait for. I mean, the buyers are coming up. We need to end up seeing those buyers die out. They might even end up making an attempt to go up higher. You don't know how high they could go. Maybe it might even end up coming back in all the way till within there. But at least if the market can possibly come back in within that area and possibly hold to the downside, then you could possibly end up taking another sell to possibly come and challenge, these sellers who are sitting down within here. So do watch out for those three areas. Also remember the region at the top. Definitely an area that you definitely need to keep your eyes out on. In case the market breaks to the upside, then unfortunately there will be no trade for us. So last but not least, for the AUD pairs, so we do have the euro against the Australian dollar. For this one, new entrant, we're expecting some buys to come in. The morning when we're looking at the charts, price was somewhere within here. This was not totally unexpected, but the time at which it's happened, not really the time that we would have expected it to happen. But since the market has already done that, let's try and figure out where the big boys could possibly be heading on this one as well. So you can see that there's this region right here. This is all the way on the daily. So the last time price was here was back in 2023. Seems like the markets are challenging highs and lows, which could mean that maybe to some extent, maybe the market could be fear-based. Don't know what the big boys are possibly fearing, but they definitely foresee something. Considering the fact that we're seeing a lot of strength coming in on the yens and the Swiss franc pairs, and a lot of weakness on the Australian dollar and the New Zealand dollar, maybe to some extent we could be getting into some sort of a fear-based market. So for this one, I'm going to be watching out for these three regions right here. Right now, the market has tapped a high. This is also some sort of a daily level, almost something similar with what we've seen with the rest of the AUDs. You can see that this one, there's a massive reaction to the upside. So you could find that maybe the daily sellers who've been sitting within that area have reacted. But of course, our bias is to still try and see whether we can get buys. Let's see if we can get the market coming back in within here. If it does, then we could possibly try and see whether we could get some buying opportunities. Make sure that you manage your trades within there, but also watch out for this region at the bottom right here. This is going to be the last area where ideally we should be looking for our buying opportunities. So that's pretty much it for the AUD pairs. So right now we're going to move on to the last set of currency pairs, which are the New Zealand dollar pairs, and we're going to mix and match them up. And I know it's going to be almost a similar situation with the rest in terms of adjusting levels. So for this one, at least this one is not gone too far. So I guess we can possibly still look at these same three areas right here. So right now the market is pulling back in within this region. So watch out for that. In case the market, let's say, does end up doing some sort of a probe and comes back into the upside and holds within here, then you could possibly try and see whether you could get your selling opportunities higher up, within that area there, or maybe somewhere within this region right here. But of course, remember, let's say if you get the sales here, let's say if the market does come back in, maybe attempts to go to the upside, maybe it's even just looking for this price here. It may not even get all the way till within there, comes back into the downside, holds within here. If you get the sell coming down, this has to be your next point of reference, because like I pointed out in some of the other currency pairs, I mean, you always have to look at the low and the high that the markets normally tend to get to, because if you don't, what you could find is that the same buyers who reacted off here could easily end up reacting on you. And I mean, it should be your next point of reference on your way down, your next waiting point. So just make sure that you watch out for this region here. And of course, if we break the downside, then ideally that would be a good thing. So moving on into the next currency pair, which is the New Zealand dollar against the Swiss franc. So I don't know why on this one the levels are not really showing. Let's see if it's something up. Maybe we'll give it some time. We'll come back to it in a bit. So let's look at the New Zealand dollar against the US dollar. So for this one, new entrant, we're going to be trying to see whether we can get sales. The market has come down. Let's try and adjust these levels just slightly, just to incorporate the story of what's going on. this mid-level right here, I think we'll have to bring it a bit lower. Seems like maybe it could be somewhere within this area right here. So I guess this could be the new adjusted level. So you can't see the sellers pushing down off there. Let's see what happens within this region right here. And of course, also watch out for this area right here. You could find that maybe since the market has come back in, definitely need to watch out for that. But of course, you could easily end up trying to see whether you could get down, till within that area there. So do watch out for those three areas. Hopefully you've taken note of them. So let's try to go back to this one. So because the levels are here now. So for this one, we're going to be trying to see whether we can get some sells. The market seems to be coming back in within there. But I think what we could possibly end up doing is we could possibly end up adjusting the levels to end up having something like this. Let's go up to the 4-hour time frame just to see how accurate those levels are, or if price has been there before. So let's go up the daily. And this one almost does end up seeming like the Canadian dollar against the Swiss franc. Seems like price has definitely not been here before. You can see that past 2004, we're currently trading below the dinosaur. So for this one, it's going to be a bit tricky. I think you really need to keep your eyes out on this one, just like on the Canadian dollar against the Swiss franc. But ideally, I'll put a mid-level there. So let's go down to the 3-minute time frame. So it seems that maybe the market bounced off there, came to the downside. Maybe somewhere within here, you can't see a push of the sellers to the downside. So I guess we could possibly end up leaving that level. But at least we can see the main seller who's pushing down is somewhere within this region here. So let's see what happens if price comes back in within that area there. And of course, do watch out for this region here. At least if we can get the market maybe turning around within this area. Right now, the bars are coming up quite aggressively. So if they can slow down within that area, then possibly we could try and see whether we could get some selling opportunities. So hopefully you can end up taking note of that. But definitely remember, in case the market breaks above the red SNR, then unfortunately there will be no trade for us. So last but not least, for the NZD pairs and of course for the currency pairs, this is the euro against the New Zealand dollar. So this one we're going to be trying to see whether we can get some buying opportunities. You can see that the markets have already moved. I mean, in the morning when I'm looking at the charts, price was down within this area. You can see that the market has really gone to the upside. Right now, it seems like it's pulling back in within this region. So what I could do for this one, maybe adjust them, put them something like that. Let's see if, since right now the market is just coming back in within there, maybe we could even end up possibly having a look or keeping the buyers or the main buyers who are actually pushing the market to the upside. So I guess we could end up looking at these three regions today. They're a bit wide, especially for the 15 and the 3-minute time frame. But again, based on the story of what we're seeing, I think you can't end up denying something. So let's see what happens. In case the market bounces off here, this is the next area we'll be watching out for. And of course, in case this price is not good enough, the last set of buyers that ideally we should be watching out for will be down somewhere within this particular region right here. So hopefully you've taken note of that. And of course, of all the currency pairs that we have looked at. So I guess right now we can end up jumping on to the indices and the commodities. So we'll start off with the NAS 100, the Dow Jones, then move on to silver, and then finish off with gold. So for the NAS 100, for this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could have gotten some selling opportunities. And if we just go back to Friday, you can see the three areas that I had pointed out. The market was somewhere within this region. It had broken to the downside. I did talk about maybe you could find the market maybe attempting to break to the upside of this area. Unfortunately, it couldn't, but generally you can see that the market really did hold within this area. During the non-farm period, the market did actually go to the downside, came back in for some sort of a pullback back within there. And you can see that off that time and off that region right there, the market has been coming down quite aggressively. So for this one, we will possibly need to do some adjustments. Let's even just go up to the 4-hour time frame just to gain more context of where we are. So right now you can see that the market is back in within this particular region right here. Definitely seems like a support region. Anyone who's looking for sales now, you're definitely off location. So you're possibly better off waiting for the market to either pull back in. And if we just go back to the 4-hour time frame again, just to try to figure out where we are, could find that maybe somewhere within this region seems like there's an SNR. Of course, on the 4-hour time frame, you could put them wide, but remember that the levels also need to be relevant, for the 15-minute time frame. Otherwise, if you end up putting them too wide, then you're turning from intraday trader into a swing trader. So that means that the setups that you're looking for might actually not end up happening today. So for today, let's see what happens within these 3 areas right here. So right now the buyers are reacting off there. Let's see if they can come up back in within this region right here. If that happens, then maybe we could find some selling opportunities. The sellers who are coming down could possibly end up attempting to break their previous record, which currently, right now, as we know, stands somewhere within this region right here. So do watch out for those 3 areas right there. But the bias is to look for selling opportunities, of course, for as long as we're holding beneath that red SNR to the downside. So the next one is the US 30 or the Dow Jones or the WS 30 on MT5. So for this one on Friday, we're trying to see whether we could have gotten some selling opportunities. You can see the 3 regions right there that I had pointed out. In the morning when we're looking at the charts, price was somewhere within here. I did talk about maybe waiting to see whether we could get a breach to the downside. It did happen. The market did actually end up holding within here. Then it did move to the downside. At least if you timed now the pullback, especially after the market had moved away from this region, get that sell. You can see that this one did also work out quite well. Of course, during the non-farm payroll at around 3:30, that's when the market really started its move to the downside, and at around 4:30 or thereabout. So for this one, for today, these are the 3 areas we will be watching out for. This one hasn't really gone far and beyond the area, so we won't adjust it much. But one thing you do need to end up noting is if you do get the sells within here, just make sure that you really watch out for this region right here. Because if the market does come in and it starts getting stuck within this area, it doesn't actually end up making a move, then at that point in time, maybe doing some sort of money management might actually not be such a bad idea. But let's see what happens, because you could find that the market could easily end up probing within this area. If it does come back in, and let's say these sellers who are sitting here actually end up struggling, to push the market to the downside of this region, then that means that there's a possibility these sellers might actually get a much better price. So that much better price could be somewhere within here. There's also a minus SNR somewhere within this region. So just watch out for that. At least if you get the buyers slowing down within that area and the sellers start to show up, then you could find that the market could give you a good sell. We're also not too sure whether the market could start to range within here. So that's a reason why if you get the sells there, you just need to make sure you manage within here, because you could find that, especially if the market comes in within this region, then attempts to go up to the upside. I think at that point in time, it will be more or less confirmed that it will be in a range. But since right now we don't know, but it's always good to anticipate what could possibly end up happening. You're better off still managing your trade within there. So remember, for as long as we're holding below the red SNR, to the downside, then the buyers should be to look for those buying opportunities, selling opportunities rather. So the next one is silver. Now for silver, the buyers was to look for buys. Remember that for this one, for as long as we're holding above here, the buyers was to look for those buying opportunities. In the morning when we're looking at the charts, price was somewhere within here. So it broke to the upside, held within here. You can see that at around 3, the market pushed itself off this region to the upside. Definitely did need to manage your trade within that region right there. You can see that the sellers did come in quite aggressively, challenged this region to the downside, but unfortunately the market just couldn't hold, within this area right here. So for this one, we're going to be watching out for these 3 areas. We just take out this region at the top. So these are the 3 areas that we're going to be watching out for. Right now, the market seems to be in a catch-22 situation. So that means that we'll have to be a bit patient in terms of waiting to see what happens. Because, the buyers who are holding the market are somewhere within here. And also don't get trigger happy in terms of looking for the sells. You can see that the market has attempted to break free of this area twice, and it still couldn't. So you're not too sure whether that could happen again and the market could come back into the upside. So the best thing to do is to either wait for the market to come back into this region to the upside. If that does happen, and let's say we get the market, holding within here, you could find that maybe the market could possibly end up giving, another buying opportunity of this area right here. So that's the first scenario. The other scenario that could possibly end up happening is if the market does end up coming back in within this area right here, maybe even attempts to break to the upside, comes back in and literally holds below, then at that point in time, you could possibly end up starting to look for your selling opportunities. So right now for this one, let's be a bit patient. Let's see what happens. I think it will be dependent on where maybe the market will be, at around 3, 4:30, during the US session open. That could ideally give you some pointers of what you could do. But of course, if the market does end up breaking free of this region to the downside, then I guess at that point in time, we could possibly end up saying that we're in sellers. But it's always good to wait for the pullback, because you can imagine that even when price was down within here, many people would not have thought that the market would have come back into the upside, this region right here, but it did. So generally, you should be aware that there are buyers who are sitting somewhere within here. So it's up until we see a bit more of the story. That's when we can possibly end up making a much, much more better informed decision. So last but not least, we do have gold. Now for gold, the buyer is supposed to look for buying opportunities on Friday. And you can see the 3 regions right here that I had pointed out. In the morning when we're looking at the charts, let's go back to a time like this on Friday. Price was somewhere within here. I did point out that maybe if we got the market pulling back, it may be somewhere as close as possible within here. We could have looked for the buys. You can see that the buys did actually end up taking off from here. There was an SNR somewhere within this region right here. And of course, when the non-farm payroll came out, of course, lots of guys were possibly thinking that the market was going to reach this region to the upside. But you can see much later on, the market did actually end up coming down quite aggressively, all the way till within this region right here. But we're still holding in buyers, funny enough. So for this one, we're going to be waiting to see what happens. Of course, the levels are still more or less the same. The market has really moved a lot, but it's not really moved far and beyond the areas that we did have on Friday. So let's see what happens on this one. Right now, the sellers have come down aggressively. It's not very surprising to see them do that, because I mean, there was a level somewhere within here that the market broke to the downside, came back in, it's just up to that region. So let's see what happens in as much as the sellers are coming down aggressive. Let's see if the buyers within this region could end up containing them. If they can't and the market breaks to the downside, then I guess at that point in time, we could look for the sells. But also one thing you'll end up noting, especially for the guys who've done the one-on-one, and to some extent, the guys who've done the AMP can also see what could be going on the bigger time frame. You can see that the buyers have been going up, sellers have come in aggressively. So right now, what we're waiting to see is what happens. Are these buyers within this region going to struggle or not? But generally, we're still holding within our buyers. So in terms of also jumping in on the sells, just because you've seen this big seller coming in, you could actually be jumping ahead. So it's possibly better to still wait, because you could find that the market could still end up possibly turning around, maybe somewhere within this region right here. And you could find that the buyers could come up maybe to challenge the previous high, which is somewhere within this region right here. But generally, on the bigger time frame, to some extent, it seems like the market could possibly be turning. But remember, you're not the big boy, so don't try and jump ahead of time. Just wait and see, first of all, what does end up happening before you do actually end up jumping in on yourselves. But ideally, we're still in buyers. We just need to see if we can get a slowdown, of the sellers within this region. If not, you could even find that maybe it could even end up happening somewhere within here. I mean, you could find that maybe the market could turn around within here. The market could hold within this region right here. If you're really good at reading the story on the smaller time frame, you could find that off that region, the market could possibly end up moving to the upside, and you could find some good buys here, managing within that area, maybe even scaling in at that point in time, possibly targeting all the way at the top there. So let's just wait and see what happens. But remember, the indices and the commodities, like we always point out, we're fully technical on them. The fundamentals will step in from time to time, and you will find them shaking the markets around. But ideally, most of the time, we end up looking at the technical aspect of things. So I guess that's pretty much it in terms of everything. For guys coming in late, feel free to take note of that. That is what our watch list is going to be looking like. So I see on the Q&A section, I see Alan Ronald there. He's saying thanks. Good to see you here, Alan, as always. Karibu sana, Metrin. Good to see you here. You're asking me to repeat NAS 100 and also the Dow Jones. And I see Dennis Wambua there. You're also asking me to repeat the indices, please. All right. Did I move too quick on the indices? But anyway, let me do them for Metrin and also for Dennis. So for this one, the NAS 100, basically we're going to be trying to see whether we can get sales. Hopefully you can end up taking note of this. So right now we're waiting to see whether we can get the pullback coming in, maybe till within there to get the sales. or maybe if the pullback can come in all the way to within there. But of course, it's not really a good time to look for the sells. Let's wait and see if we can get the market breaking this region to the downside. Then hopefully we could look for the selling opportunities. But right now, give those buyers the benefit of doubt. So I hope that's clear for Dennis and Metrin. And last but not least, the Dow Jones. For this one, we're going to be trying to see whether we can also end up getting some selling opportunities. So these are the three areas we're going to be watching out for. So let's see what happens. If the market comes back into the upside and actually holds within here, then at that point in time, we'll have to be on standby because you could find the market coming back in all the way to within there. So even just get rid of this. But if at least the market comes back in within this area, maybe gives us a proper pullback, and we read that even on the 15-minute time frame, and we see that the buyers are struggling within here, we could look for sells, but you'll just have to watch out for this region right here. Don't make sure that you don't ignore that area. It could give you issues. So I hope that sorts you out, Matrine and Dennis. I see Caroline Moniki there. Good to see you as well. You're asking, when looking at the trend of any pair, do you look at it from when it started on that day? Your question is not very clear, but what I can say is, based on the structure, it's just a matter of what you can visually end up seeing on your chart. I know sometimes maybe you possibly end up seeing us going up higher time frame, sometimes to the daily, sometimes to the H4 time frame. But that's when we are really trying to get a point of reference in terms of, like for example, like for the Canadian dollar pairs or the yen pairs, they've gone to extremes. We don't even know where we are. That's the reason why we're going up, to those time frames to really try and figure out where we are in the whole story of price. But generally, when you're looking at trends, or the market structures, let's just call it the market structures. If you can visually see it on the 15-minute time frame, then you're good. Going up to the 1 hour time frame may be even better because it will give you more context of what you're looking at. So it's basically what you can generally see on your charts, because remember that the structures of the markets constantly change all the time. If you end up going too far back in time, you might be looking at information that's irrelevant. It might not really be beneficial for you. Like, for example, if let's say, for example, the market was channeling last week, today we're doing something maybe completely different. You see that information, in as much as it is information, but it's not very beneficial for you at that point in time. So basically, it's always good to always look at where are you. So you see, like right now, if we're looking at this particular currency pair right here, to some extent, it looks like the market is trending to the downside. In as much as somewhere within this region right here, the market looked like it was channeling to the upside. This information to us right now is not relevant to us. So it's always based on where is price. If you can figure out what's happening with where price is, the better for you. So I hope that answers your question, Caroline, in as much as it wasn't very clear, but I'm just trying to figure out maybe what you could potentially be asking. But in case it's not very clear, always feel free to reach out to us through our contact details. You can give us a call. We'd be more than happy to explain to you in case anything is not too clear. So I guess that's pretty much it from me and from us. I want to thank you guys for making the time to be here with us. I always thank you guys because I know you're busy people, but you always give us a piece of your day each and every morning. And we don't take that for granted. So much appreciated of that. And of course, we hope that you do end up achieving a lot in terms of your trading. I see Patricia there saying thank you very much, John. Karibu sana, Patricia. Always good to see you here as well. And Daniel Smith saying thank you, Afriforex team. Karibu sana. So I guess we'll see you guys tomorrow. In case you do get any setups, whether good or bad, feel free to send them in to us. Us guys will be more than happy to showcase them here. Contact details are there on the chat box. You can send them in to us via WhatsApp. For the guys joining us on YouTube, if you've liked this, then make sure you do give a thumbs up. And of course, if you've been helped, then you can also help us back by subscribing. But I guess we'll see you guys tomorrow. So with that, may the peeps be with you. God bless and bye for now.